And Russ, you were absent also. Yeah.
Forgot.
Myself, I.
Aye.
Peter, I. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4. Four of us, right? Paul.
Yep.
And Roy. And Joanna is 3. You weren't there. 4, 5. 5-0, because we're missing some members today. Is that correct? 5-0. So that was approved by motion by Peter, second by Joanna, 5-0, and 1, 2, I have 3 abstained. That's Rick, Roy, and Russ.
So I think that makes it
Should be
That makes
4.
it 8.
4-0-3.
Yeah.
Yes,
Four
we're
to
missing
0.
1%.
So what we say that again? No,
4 approved, 0 not approving, and
4.
3 abstained.
And then what did you say at the end there? 3
That's it.
abstained.
Total of 7.
That's
And then
7,
we have two that
and
aren't
2
here.
not here.
9.
Okay,
4-0.
that's 4-0. Okay, so that was Peter approved, Maine, Joanna second, 4-0, and 3 abstained, Rick, Roy, and Russ. And we're missing Steve and Tom today. That's 9. Okay. Thanks, everybody. And on to item number 3, the annual report, and I've just included it in the packet because we did review it last meeting. It was approved at our last meeting with some amendments, and so Paul kindly made the amendments, and I just wanted everybody to see the final product. It's been sent to town clerk for the annual report. Thank you, Paul. We're now down to item number 4 on the agenda, and we have it as fiscal year 24 capital plan update, but I think what we should have said fiscal year 25.
Well, it's a 24 update for the future.
Because we're talking about fiscal year 25.
Well, actually, we're talking through 25 through the year 2030.
Right.
That's the plan, and the budget's for 25. Mary, if you don't mind though, do you mind if I address, in looking at the sequence of this, I think if I
Oh, sure.
address 5 first, that might contribute to the discussion on 4.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So in your packet, Mary had included something that was shown to the select board that they voted on regarding approving issuance of the $9,950,000 of debt.
Mhm.
And then I had Mira also include, you include the one without this stuff though, right?
Yes.
So you have a piece of paper that looks like this, but without this on it.
Maybe
No,
more
that
now.
wasn't included
Alright.
in the packet.
Then never mind, you're gonna get a piece of paper that looks like this.
The thing I
Sorry,
have is what you passed out at the select board meeting.
Okay. Roy and Mira, Joanne, I'll have to email this to you.
Let me see. Oh, who's going? I guess that's for you. They'll take care, Mira will take care of everybody over there.
So I met with Mary prior to this meeting. And dawned on me, it's not particularly clear. Because what was actually authorized was $10,340,000. Why is the select board voting $9,950,000? So I came up with this little schedule. This is the top part of it. To show you why. Because when you start looking at the debt service schedules, some of them are a little bit different, but I'm just going to talk generally and round up a little bit. But the par amount of the bonds, when you look at the debt service schedule, is 4%. But I told the board, they approved it to award it to the low bidder. Was 3.5% essentially. So why is that? And that's because we received bond premiums. And we apply the bond premiums against the principal. So even though we had $10,340,000 of debt authorized, we really only got $9,950,000 because they also gave us premium that we used to reduce the project cost, so we don't have to borrow as much. We also got, not listed here, some premiums to pay for the issuance costs, which are getting pretty expensive nowadays. So, limiting the amount of borrowing we're doing or having a plan on how we do it is going to become more and more important. To issue this $10 million bond cost us over $100,000, funded from bond premiums that we received. So that's legal costs, that's Hilltop financial advisory costs. You do all the solicitations and, so it's not an inexpensive process, but we didn't have to separately appropriate and budget for it because of the premiums. And to the extent we had excess premiums, that's what we're allowed to apply against project costs. And so the result is we ended up actually borrowing $9,950,000. And I made some notes. There's some unique things with this bond issuance. And I thought it'd be interesting for you folks to know this, and for anyone that wants to watch this can hear this. And, if you ever want to delve into the finer details of some of this stuff, we can have a conversation. But my first note there is bond premiums reduced the effective interest rate to the 3.5%. The town center plaza, I had to go back and forth with bond counsel quite a bit. Since these have a potential private use, for example, we lease the land to a developer to build something. They cannot be considered tax exempt municipal bonds for IRS purposes, unless you meet certain criteria, and there's some safe harbors. So I had to review all that and go back and forth with bond counsel. And finally, bond counsel agreed that, yeah, you've met enough of these that I think we fall under the safe harbor guidelines of the IRS code, so that we can issue this as tax exempt bonds to purchasers, which is of course what they're looking for, as opposed to almost like a corporate bond, not tax exempt. Now that third point there, the beach plum debt. So you see is 715,000 is the amount we issued. That comes into, I think the first year is a little bit more, but after the second year, we're right about 100,000, and then it drops down a little bit each year after that. You'll start seeing that in our debt service budget and when we go through the operating budgets, but you will also see that being offset by the family support package workforce housing appropriation. So no new money being raised. The town center plaza debt service is being funded by, to the extent we have short-term rental receipts available. So that's important to know, because that's, even though we voted it as exempt debt, meaning we could raise taxes outside our levy limit to pay for it, we are first going to use short-term rental receipts, which limits the impact to the property tax burden. But, just for your planning purposes looking ahead, that means that this year would be the last year where we should expect to see a lot of heavy free cash certifications and reappropriating that free cash for, capital plan, housing production plan, stabilization funds, or like we did this last year, the wastewater stabilization fund. So we got one more year of that. But going forward, we shouldn't contemplate having too much more available from short-term rental receipts to supplement our free cash. As to the extent, and that's paying for the town center plaza debt and that's more appropriately to the wastewater design debt service. That's really what I'm sorry, I misspoke there. But interestingly enough, and this is why I handed this out, on the bottom here, I put down what's our exempt debt looks like. And because I just want to start this conversation. And we're not going to get into it deep tonight, but this will come up over and over again over the next couple of years, and especially as we start getting into implementing a wastewater plan, if that's what we end up doing. You see here, we have a lot of debt drop off. In 2026, it's 120,000. In 2027, it's almost 400,000. In 2028, it's about 114,000. You see the big one here in
2030.
year 2030, 1,250,000. That's because the wastewater planning and design money is only a 5-year bond. That'll drop off altogether. And I have some cumulative numbers here. By the year 2030, which is about the time, if we adhere to this timelines that we currently thinking about, is when we'd be bringing on debt service related to a bigger wastewater project. So my point is, cumulatively, up through 2030, there's almost $2.1 million of debt drop off that we have to figure out a way to steward know, my suggestion is at any rate, so that when we get to 2030 and have to take on more debt, we have that levy capacity available to pay that new debt. And so what you'll be hearing from me over the upcoming years will be how can we leverage the short-term rental receipts to fund excluded debt service, but when that excluded debt drops off, we don't automatically get to raise that amount of money again. So maybe what we do is a strategy of reducing short-term rental receipts to keep the excluded debt service a little bit higher so that when we get to 2020, it's there to be replaced by a new excluded debt service issue. Sounds complicated,
Keeps the tax rate stable.
Mhm.
but the impact of it is to, not to say that anybody should feel comfortable with this level of debt service. I don't mean it that way. But if you're, our property tax rate is at a certain level, all things being equal, which I know they are not, but if all things were remaining equal, it would be nice to have that debt service number be an even number,
Mhm.
not have it as I'm showing here, going down,
Mhm.
or, maybe philosophically, maybe you disagree, and that's that's why I'm bringing this up. This is a valid discussion. Alternatively, you could not have it level and you could have it dropping and you would pay less in property taxes in those years because it would be going down.
But then you'd have to increase.
But then we're going to go way up
In 1 year.
in 1 year.
Drive people.
So is it better to maintain a stable property tax base
Mhm.
and steward those funds so that when you have that big increase, it's not as big, it's not a peak in a valley type of thing.
Mhm.
So that's part of what we'll be talking about in the future.
The elementary school, I can't remember what year that finally leaves,
For a couple of years, I
in a
think.
couple
Yeah.
years. And I'm trying to remember, I thought I had it in here, the numbers for the library, but that was a 20-year bond. And I think we took that out in like 2015. We moved in 2016, so that would be 2036. Yeah, so no, I was thinking that it would be sooner, but it wasn't.
I think the school is 2026 or
yeah.
2027. 2027 looks right from Rich's sheet.
So, I didn't want to get into it too much, but it is relevant to what
Oh,
we
yes.
have on the capital plan and choices you're making about bringing on new projects and paying related debt services. One of the strategies that we typically would employ would be stewarding this debt drop off to make sure that we're maintaining that levy capacity so you don't have that peak in that valley.
So is the objective then to flatten the variation, but not increase the total?
Yeah, so,
Right.
using,
It's not like we're spending money in years we don't have to on God knows what.
No,
It's that we're managing the outer peak that we would have in a way that just makes it managed
Yeah, let's put
across
it-
those years. The sum is the same.
let me try to summarize this a little more simplistically, and I'm going to use round numbers.
Yeah.
Let's say our budget's $30 million, of which $5 million is debt service. So 25 million plus 5 million of debt. All things being equal, which I know they're not, but for sake of argument, let's say the next year, our debt service is going to be, our budget's also 25 million, but our debt service is only 4,500,000. So theoretically, we'd only have to raise property taxes of 29.5 million, right? Do we want to raise 30 million anyway and set aside that 500,000? There's lots of different ways you could do it. But for simplicity's sake, let's say set aside in a wastewater capital reserve fund.
Mm.
So that in 4 years, 5 years, whenever you're going to have your debt service going from 5 million to 7 million, you've built in that capacity to absorb it without having to increase taxes yet again.
Because you've had 500 and 500 to add to what you need.
So you keep setting
When the
aside.
need arises.
I think that makes sense that the sum is.
You collect some interest on them.
Right. And, so the only reason we have the opportunity, so the two ways you do this is you have to be really, really good, and your vendor, you got to have, make sure you can line up your vendors appropriately so that you have debt coming on board. And this is hard because we got a lot of debt drop off. So following the schedule here, the way to do it when you don't have short-term rental receipts would be, I'd have to bring on debt service that's going to generate 100, bonds that are going to generate debt service of 120,000 plus or minus a little bit to replace the one that's dropping off. So now I have to have that coming on board then. And then the following year, I got to make sure I have new bonds coming on board that's going to have debt service of almost $400,000. So that this gets difficult because now you're just hunting for projects for,
We don't want.
say, we don't want to do that. The alternative is, since we have these short-term rental receipts, is either utilize these short-term rental, since we are able to raise this money on our tax levy, because I voted as exempt debt. I could simply not, but you can't raise it if you're also using short-term rental receipts to pay for it as well. You can't raise it twice. So what I'm saying is we might want to, once we get a better sense of this is, next year stuff really, but we might consciously make a decision not to apply the short-term rental receipts, even though we
Have the
intending
money.
to do that. Because we want to be able to raise those property taxes and steward that short-term rental receipts for a future year and maintain that tax levy capacity. So it's a little,
Yeah, you've got to balance everything out in order to make it as level as possible.
so thought it was good to have this discussion on this item first because,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't want to, unless anybody has questions on the bond issue, I don't want to belabor the point, but
Okay.
you'll see some bond opportunities coming up in our capital plan and knowing this might influence your.
Okay.
So-
I've got two, just, I want to make sure I understand. So if we do what you're talking about, and I know it's a long-term thing, the set aside earns money.
It could, yeah.
Little bit.
Okay, so that makes me happy. And then on the vote of the select board of this thing, I couldn't figure out why the interest rates are different.
I don't have that in front of me.
Yeah, I have a
So-
copy.
Where are you seeing the interest rates different?
It starts with 5 and goes down to 4.3.
Oh,
No, on
yeah,
schedule.
so in 2024, the stated interest on the bond being paid out is 5%, but in a future year, it's only being paid out at 4%.
Okay.
But, and that's why I did the schedule. It's not intuitive. The par, for the current years, we're paying 5% interest on our bond.
Right.
But we got almost $500,000. It's 326 plus another 100 plus for the issuance costs of bond premium. So basically, even though we're paying a little bit higher interest, but we're paying it on less principal.
So
So
the
that-
coupon for all these bonds is 5.
Yes. But our net interest cost was the 3.5.
And one of your questions, Paul, on when we met to put together the agenda the other day, I asked Rich about refinancing.
Mhm.
And he said that under the agreements here, that we would be able to do so I believe he said 7 years.
Yeah.
So after 7 years, we would have the option of,
Rates are better.
depending upon what the rates are.
Rates are better.
Yeah.
We did it for the elementary school, because when we borrowed for the elementary school, the rates were much higher than they
Mm.
were a few years
Later
ago.
on.
Just another reason really I wanted to get this bond issue out.
Mm.
Who knows exactly what the
Mhm.
rates are gonna be, but not expecting them to decrease too much or really increase too much at this point, but and at any rate, we've got it locked in and the clock is ticking on the refinancing timeline. So if some point down the road, the rates are back to what they used to were just a couple years ago, we hopefully have the opportunity to take advantage.
That would be nice, yeah. Well, I want to thank you for putting this together because I did attend the select board meeting where the vote on this 9.9 was approved, but I couldn't tell based on the information on this letter exactly what it was for. And so when we met with Rich earlier, I asked him to explain to me what the 9.9 consisted of, because it doesn't tell you on this vote. And so I want to thank you for putting this together because I think this is very helpful. And I just want to make sure that on the Rock Harbor dredge, I know we received quite a large grant recently to help out with that. So is that taken into account here
Yeah,
on
we
these
borrowed-
numbers?
We borrowed less than what was authorized at town. What was authorized at town meeting, like 1.8 million
Mhm.
with the grant and actual project costs in hand. We only needed the 550.
Yeah, I see that. I just want, that's what
the project came in under budget
Mm.
for the
For the dredge
contracting.
itself,
Yes, and we got a
the grant,
huge grant.
yeah, but was it 1.3
Mhm.
for 1.3 million? I had in my mind,
So the two combined reduced that amount to
Mhm. the 550, yeah, yeah. And the beach plum, the 45,000, that's coming out of the 100,000 that's in the family support package, so that's not really part of the,
45,000 is a bond premium received, so we didn't need to borrow 760, we only need to borrow 715,000.
Mhm,
Because the buyer of these bonds gave us 45,000
mhm,
cash.
yeah, from the family support package.
No.
No,
No, their money, they gave it to us. So
oh,
that's what this, going back to the interest rate, that's why a 5% stated interest rate isn't equivalent to 5%, it's equal to 3.5% because we were paying 5% interest, but on lower principal,
lower amount.
because they actually gave us $45,000 for
Oh,
this project.
oh,
Rich, I think what she's asking is we're paying the debt service for the beach plum out of the,
Right, but
the
it's not,
100,000
but
for
it's
the
not
family support
45,000.
package, yeah.
The first year, the debt service on that bond is gonna be about 120,000.
Mm.
And then it's gonna drop down to about 104, then it's gonna drop
Mm.
down to mid-90s.
goes fast.
And
Yeah.
and actually, that is a little bit intentional to do it that way. Historically, prior to me getting here, the town's been issuing bonds on what's called a level debt service basis, meaning that your debt service is pretty much the same every year. I issued these when we went through with our financial advisor and bond counsel. They were structured as level principal. So
Mm.
that means what's going to happen is that your debt service declines year over year. It's a cheaper way for us to do it because we're paying more principal as as our interest goes down. We're matching that by paying more principal. So there's longer. It's cheaper over the life of the bond to do it this way, but it also generates this debt drop off,
Mhm.
which is one of the strategies that we got to have in place if we need to have a big infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure implementation.
Is this at all helpful? I know you were a little bit perturbed, I should say, that we didn't get a AAA rating. Is this at all helpful, or was this, I mean, this was information that was known, so.
No, I'm actually more perturbed now because
Yeah. He sees how well he's done and he's even madder.
Because I was
Okay.
talking to
I'm mad, you can add my name to the mad list
Orleans has a big bond issuance coming up. And
for their,
they asked me for some advice because their finance director is retiring, so I talked to him. And in doing some transitional assistance with their retiring finance director, I talked because they got a
tomorrow she retires.
lot of bonds a lot of projects and a lot of bonds. They have like 60, 70 issues. So I just want to make sure that's, I had a good understanding of what they had in the queue there. And they have the exact same issue where S&P tells them that they have a lot of debt.
Mm.
I'm like, yeah, we got the same issue. That's why we didn't get AAA. And like, oh, well, we got the AAA because we told them that it was all exempt debt and we have the ability to raise the property taxes to pay for the debt. I'm like, well, I told them that too. How come they're not buying it from when I tell them, but they buy it when Orleans tells them. So now, now I'm doubly perturbed, but
Yep.
Even without the AAA, the 3.5's effective.
I don't know how much more we would have gotten,
Right.
honestly.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be a little bit less if we were AAA versus AA.
Back in the day, by rule of thumb was always about a point, is the effect of a rating jump or two would be worth about a point on your bond issuance, which is, big money. But
That's right.
those are back in the days when the rates were 7%,
Yeah, higher.
8%, At the margins of 3%, I mean, how much are you really going to get a bump? Unless you're, junk bond or something, but.
Excuse me, Rich.
Yeah. Roy?
Did Rich mention that the sheet that he's looking at was not in the packet?
Yes,
Okay, could we get that email to us?
Yes.
sure. I'll have Mira email it to you and to Joanna.
Sure.
I'm sure she'd be
Thank you.
happy to. Any other comments, questions on the vote on the bond? And again, I want to thank you for putting this together because I think that this explains what this didn't explain.
Yeah.
So that's very helpful.
And so onto the capital plan
So
then.
now we'll go back to number 4.
And so you got a book, and Roy and Joanna, were you able to pick up, or do you have this stuff I'm holding up?
I dropped off the documents at Roy's house the other day, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure about Joanna.
Did we email this out, Mira, this big book?
No, if I can, if there's something at town hall, I can pick it up tomorrow.
Okay.
But
Well, we
I
got
can-
our first draft of our capital budget book, and I will be hitting this up on the website after this meeting. So this week it'll be on the website. And you do have available to you all the pages. It's 101 pages at the moment. And by the time we finalize it, it'll be, probably a few more, but substantially, this is complete. And we're only waiting on at this point is getting some new 3-ring binders for you. So if you hold on to these, we'll get you a binder and you can put this in it. And when we get the operating budget stuff, you can put that in it as well and keep everything in one spot. I'm just gonna, and then separately, these are all PDFs, so it makes it easy to read on the website. And when you go to the website, you can actually magnify it and make it bigger, so it's easier to read on the website. Yeah, can you give Russ a copy?
Where are they on the website?
It'll be under our budget and town meeting page. So I got to set that up for this fiscal year. So hopefully we'll get to that this week. So this is easier to read electronically, but I know people like to have a copy.
Mhm.
So we got one. There are also, when you pick up your copy, I blew up the 5-year plan and the capital budget pages onto big pieces of paper, so you can separately look at those when you're contemplating those pages. But I'm going to give you a quick run through of the book in total. Why is there 101 pages?
Because you couldn't fit it into 100?
Fit it in.
So starting on page 4
Dear.
is the start of the 5-year plan, which goes for a couple pages. On page 8 is a worksheet that we use to evaluate things, which I haven't fully done yet, but that's why we'll have a final draft of this later on. But basically, this is everything that's on tap for the upcoming town meeting that would be added into a capital budget article. We'll come back to these in a second, because that's what we'll talk about tonight mostly. Page 10 is some of the criteria one might use to evaluate some of those things. So you have that just as pretty much informational. Page 18 starts our town-wide fleet inventory. And the reason I put this in here is because we do have vehicle replacement programs where we appropriate an amount of money for example, the police department cruiser replacement plan. We don't identify specific vehicles. We just give them a slug of money because we know these are operational items and they're going to be replacing some every year. So every year they get an amount of money to execute that program. But I still like to provide, these couple of pages, starting on page 18 and 19, the listing of the vehicles that we do have. And a condition assessment as to what condition we think they're in. And you'll see there's lots of reds and a couple of oranges, which indicate that red is, immediate need of, should really consider immediately replacing those. And the oranges being, they're qualified for replacement. It's just a matter of, can you get another year out of them, or do you want to replace them sooner rather than later? So it basically indicates that we have an ongoing need to replace our fleet. So, it's important for you to have that information. Also, starting on page 20 is our other available funds section. And that's where I do projections to make sure that some of the funding sources that we rely on to fund this capital plan are sufficient. So page 21 is the first projection, and that's the ambulance fund projection, showing that for the next 6 years that we have sufficient funds on hand to execute the program that's provided for in this capital plan. Although we are dipping into it.
Mm.
And so long-term, we need to look at that. Part of the reason for the dipping into it is we made the conscious decision last year with the chief to add that third ambulance.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes these things take a little bit time to flesh out. Maybe we'll see an increase in the calls would be the same, but maybe we do more of the transport, whereas in the past, maybe we relied on a mutual aid ambulance to do the transport and then they got the billing. So maybe because of this third ambulance might see an opportunity to, increase the receipts in my projection because we're doing more
Yeah, I was
transport.
just going to ask about that, because I think there have been discussions about increasing the cost.
And there's also an opportunity perhaps to increase rates.
Mm.
I talked to the chief about that. He didn't think so right now at the moment, but 5 years from now, maybe it might be.
Mhm.
The next page, on page 22 is another fund, or chapter 90, which indicates that we've got sufficient assets on hand to execute the capital plan that's the 5-year plan that's been presented. And same thing on our, well, not quite the same thing, but also a projection on our media or PEG Access Fund.
Mhm.
If we continue with the plan and the amount of revenues that we're getting, we will not have sufficient assets at the end of this.
Mm.
And so I got to do some work. I think a part of that is we have a new contract and we're getting receipts finally starting in FY24 based on that new 10-year contract. So perhaps I can increase the receipts here. And if that's not the case, we'll have to look at how much we're utilizing on the operating budget subsidy.
I have a couple questions, Rich. Chapter 90, that's a state fund.
Yep.
Right? And PEG, is that, could you tell me again what that stands for? Something education,
Yeah, public education and
education.
government.
public.
So that's the, we get a 5% fee,
Mm.
franchise fee from Comcast for every subscriber in town. So long-term with, the trend of cutting the cable cords, you might expect that actually to decrease as opposed to increase.
Yeah, it's television. It's based on television, not internet.
Hmm.
So, so that one's bears some watching. We'll have to, but we don't have to make that decision today or this year, but, over multiple years, we gotta pay attention to that and
Mhm.
make sure we're getting the receipts and that the revenue is staying at the level that we need to support what we're intending to use it for. And then also finally in this section on page 24, is I printed out a current list. I got some account cleanup that has to happen. You see a red R,
Yeah.
that shouldn't be an R.
Oh.
So I got to do some cleanup with Tina when she comes back.
What does the R stand?
But the R
or
stands
should
for
be, rather.
We should stand for any of those accounts that we're putting in recurring money. Those are our recurring replacement programs. So our fleet replacement programs for each department
Mhm.
and our equipment replacement programs and our facility maintenance replacement programs. If it has a R, that means we're funding it annually.
Mhm.
The things that I have red R's shouldn't be there because there's no commitment to fund those on a recurring basis. So I think it's just a account cleanup.
So should just be the black Rs and not the red Rs.
Yeah. The things that have red R's really are one-time items that
Yeah,
aren't
no,
part of a
yeah,
replacement
and-
plan.
Yeah, they're not recurring.
And this gives me just an opportunity to remind you on these replacement plans, and you'll see it in the detail in these books. I think I might not have printed them out in the past, but I did this year. And I do need to update them and improve them a little bit. But a replacement plan isn't just a black hole for money to go into. A replacement plan is documented for particular things. So, an equipment replacement plan is only, we're asking for, maybe it'd be better if I gave you a concrete example. In our, go to the big pieces of paper. In our 5-year capital plan, for example. So I'm pulling up, this big piece of paper that mirrors.
Are we going from this to the?
This is the same thing that's in the book,
Yeah, I know that.
but it's just a bigger
Yeah,
version.
yeah.
But in this 5-year plan,
Yeah.
down the bottom of the first page,
Mhm.
it says, no, it's not the bottom of the
You
first.
mean the bottom of the back, the end,
The,
where the funding provided by, is that what you're?
no.
Vehicle fleet replacement.
Yeah, I'm looking for the equipment one though.
Very bottom of the first page. Under vehicles and fleet assets.
Yeah, but I'm looking for the equipment one,
You're looking for the what?
the equipment one.
Oh, the equipment.
All right. So under the equipment section, you see a line that says equipment replacement program recurring. The DPW. Oh, no, that's not a good example. Sorry.
It's about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the seventh item down.
No, all right. Start
Under-
again. We're gonna start fresh here. The second page,
Yeah,
the bottom of the second page under
Right.
the equipment section,
right.
second line from the bottom says PD Department Equipment Replacement Program. Let's focus on the police department. They're getting $20,000 a year, every year. I think it bumps up to
Wait,
25.
wait a minute, I'm not with you because I'm looking at,
You're looking at the wrong sheet.
oh,
That's the FY 25 capital budget.
I'm looking at the 25.
Yeah, that's not what I want you to look at.
Oh, I'm
Look at the
sorry.
5-year plan. Yeah, that one. All right, how about this?
Yeah.
All right, let's start again. Take it on faith that on this 5-year plan, there's a line item for the police department equipment
I'm
for
sorry.
$20,000 a year
Which one are you on right now?
on the 5-year plan.
Just on the 5-year plan. Okay.
Second page.
Yep.
At the bottom.
At the bottom, all the way to the bottom.
Yeah, I see it.
Just above
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
it does.
Okay.
So I started trying to point all this out to you to try to explain and bring to the table as you go into the budget season here.
Mhm.
You know, what the goals of what we're doing, equipment replacement programs. What I want to convey is that it's just not a black hole. In the details of this capital budget book in the 101 pages, if you went to the police department section, you're going to see what that is for.
Mhm.
And off the top of my head, I can't recall at the moment, but it could be for, tasers, it could be for radios, it could be for body armor, things that are really operational in nature, but you don't buy them all the time. Whatever is documented, that's what it's for. That's, and I've come up with, the $20,000 is documented because, you have X number of radios that cost X number of dollars and you need to replace them X number of years, and you come up with a straight line number.
The 20.
And the same thing for whatever the other equipment is that you need as well. And we came up with a number of 20 grand. That's what it is for. So anything that's not documented in that replacement plan, it's not for that. So if the chief comes to me or presents a bill to accounting office, Tina, to be paid out of that article, and it isn't one of those things that's documented, it ought not be paid out of there. If you need that money, that's a separate capital project. So I just want to bring that back to the table. We want to talk about our capital plan. It is a little different that we have these recurring funding programs where every year we're putting a slug of money. Again, this is not a carte blanche. It's for specific items.
Keep it level.
Right. So each department has that for their fleet.
Mhm.
Most departments have it for their equipment. If you see an amount in there for 5,000, that's like the bare minimum for our capital plan is a $5,000 item. That means that we know there's things out there we might not have documented the program all that well because 5,000 is the bare bones. But if you're expecting more than that in your equipment replacement plan, we're documenting what the items are, what their life is, and what the replacement cost is, and deriving a straight line number to fund that.
And it's all capital levy costs.
And those are the things we factored into our $400,000 capital levy
Yeah,
override a couple of years ago. So having explained that, one of the things I'm identifying this year, it was intuitive last year that it existed, but I'm seeing it now more in this year's numbers when I'm talking to department heads, is there will be a time, I mean, obviously, everybody knows that if we had a capital levy override of $400,000, that's only going to last so long. And if you're replacing like items, someday those items are going to cost more. And we're starting to see that. Not impactful necessarily for this year, but 2 years, 3 years from now, we'll need to reevaluate. Either we'll have to add more money to that levy override, or we'll have to accommodate, operational savings on the levy and repurpose it to here, because our need for recurring equipment
Cost.
is gonna be, I'm making up numbers now, but maybe 425,000 instead of 400 in a couple of years, and someday it'll be $450,000 and not 420. It's the cost of those items do increase over time.
So even though you have a couple of places where you've got, say, 20,000 across for a number of years, the chances of that staying that price is probably not sustainable.
Right, so this is the third year of this kind of plan. And so I'm happy we've got 3 years. So next year, it's gonna be a conscious effort to update these things
Yep.
for something that's a little more. We have to update the prices.
Mhm.
And so, people might change equipment too, the operation of the
Oh, yeah.
department. So, we need to, with all the departments, re-go through this exercise again and
Equipment gets updated and becomes
Right.
different, and you want to replace what you've got with something that's brand new. I mean, not just new, but updated.
different equipment.
Yeah, right, different. Thank you.
All right, so anyway, so I got a little off track there, but that's substantially what's in the rest of this book. I gave you all these funding sources. I'm gonna skip over because we're gonna come back. But substantially, and it starts at page 51. Take it, please. No, a couple back from that. It starts at page 48.
Mhm,
Page 48 on is detail.
mhm.
Everything is summarized in the beginning of this book. Page 48 is our townwide facilities and maintenance. Infrastructure plan. It gives us detail of what's in that 5-year plan summary that's in the front. Likewise, we have a townwide building maintenance and replacement capital plan that gives us the detail of each facility and where we think the work's going to occur, which is the documentation of why we're asking for what we're asking in the summary of the plan. And then we get into the departments, and you got a detailed section for the IT shop, you got a detailed section for the police department, and a detailed section for the fire department. So all those items, are from each of the departments. And if they're asking for something, and this is one of the things I need to update in the next month or so, if they're asking for something that's outside of their normal recurring replacement plans, and I escaped, maybe the DPW might have something this year, they're asking for a loader, for example. We do ask for, what we call the capital budget request form to be filled out, justifying the need for it. I don't ask for those forms on anything that's in the replacement plan because it's built into that, but anything outside of those replacement plans that's being asked for this upcoming town meeting, we will, by the time we get to town meeting and go through the budget review process, have those forms. So when they come in front of you, you can speak to them about, why they're requesting these capital items, and they'll have something to refer back to you on as well.
If it's not just a plain replacement, if it's being replaced, but it's being updated with something new, would you request those forms then? Or
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Let's see if I have an example of one. Well, before I do that, let me finish the quick walkthrough of this. So 48 on is all that detail, department specific. So when the departments are coming in front of you, refer to their section here, and you'll have specifically what they asked for. But going back, I skipped a few pages, and I just want to point out why I skipped it. It's just because it's mostly informational. In here on
pages are you on now?
losing track already. On page 31, which goes on for several pages, it's basically just instructions. You don't need to pay a lot of attention to that unless you're interested, but that's the instructions that we provide to the department. And so there's some pretty, it's good for information for you to have access to and to know what's asked of them. And, instructions, how they fill it out. Page 41, I'm particularly proud of. 40. So I co-opted this rating system for fleet assessments. So this is what the points mean. You know, so if you go through, we do ask based on that fleet inventory, you know, we want to know that you still have these vehicles. And I'm working actually with Mirrors. One of the things she's taking on is making sure that this jives with our insurance schedule.
Mhm.
And eventually we're going to do the same thing on our facilities. But everything that we own is insured and covered and registered. And if it's not, and there's a case where there are things that we own that aren't insured and aren't registered, and they're not in service, I now can follow, now that we've done this and people understand this a little bit, I can make sure we get rid of these things and we put them out for auction and get money for them. And, you know, stop having unnecessary assets hanging around that might cost us money or liability. But in any event, for anything that is in service, you have to do an assessment. And that's, if you go through and do this assessment at the bottom here, it shows you what all these things mean.
Mhm.
And if it has 28 points or more, it's red, which means it needs immediate replacement consideration.
Did you determine the points, or is this something that's been being done across the board with other towns?
Other towns do it if I told them to over the years to do it, yes. But what it is, towns, you know, not to pat myself on the back, but, you know, being a little superfluous now, but towns will pay tens or if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to engineering firms to come do fleet assessments for them and give them a methodology. And a former town that I used to work in did it. I think they paid them like 80 grand for an engineer to come in and tell them how to do this. So great. You're going to spend 80 grand. I'm going to co-opt that study. It's all public information and put it into my system and implement it. So people don't have to spend 80 grand every year, you know. But all this criteria is based on a national organization. It's based on the American Public Works Association Fleet Assessment Guidelines, of which has actually been a book written. So every once in a while I'll go back, you know, so thanks to the engineering firm that pulled it all together for us. And every once in a while, you know,
Do they
geek
change?
out, I will update myself as to the latest criteria that the American Public Works Association
Yeah.
puts out. And if they change their criteria, I'll change this assessment.
Because some cars, I'm just thinking of fleet, some cars do a better job of maintenance than others. So that
Yeah.
might make a difference. I don't know.
So, you know, it's not perfect, but it's a guideline. And, you know, you get this all the time. Different finance committees have different approaches, but I've been in towns where, you know, God forbid you ask for a replacement of a vehicle that has less than 200,000 miles. They don't like it because, you know, they drive around a truck that they've driven for 30 years that has 250,000 miles. And why isn't that good enough for you? Right. Okay. Valid. But if that's your, you know, criteria, then, you know, whether this is your criteria or, you know, you need 250,000 miles as your criteria, I got to tell everybody what the criteria is so that, you know, we act accordingly. This, I think, is solid criteria to, you know, that's why I referenced that big townwide fleet inventory.
Mhm.
You'll see a lot, and it's why it's color coded. You see reds and oranges. In my mind, it justifies the fact that we continue to invest money annually into our fleet, that there are, that, you know, we're not sitting on a bunch of green assets that don't need to be replaced. If everything was green, you know, then I would say to myself, why are we continuing to appropriate money on this program for this year?
Yeah.
Maybe we should put a pause on it for a year or two until we get a couple of yellows, right?
But that's probably not good to have everything green because then it's gonna all turn to red.
Yeah.
Some,
Or you could do what we're doing and set the money aside
Yeah.
annually so that when they do turn to yellows and reds and oranges, you have the money to replace them. Okay. And then finally, the last piece, I say it best for last.
Are you prouder
I
of
don't
this?
know, it's been pretty good.
Yeah, I'm proud of this too.
Good so far.
it's the only one on Cape Cod that understands it.
So what page are you on now?
Page 29.
And
and 30.
page. I was expecting it was the last page in the book here. Page 29,
And 30. Yeah.
29, 30. Okay.
So the reason this is important, this is where the rubber meets the road.
We were just talking about vehicles.
Yeah, it's very good segue then. If we were to implement, so on the big page, it shows, you know, the pages that show the 5-year plan. Not only have we identified all the things for the, you know, upcoming year and the 5 years after that we think are going to be hitting, At the bottom of it, I also put where I think how we're going to fund it all. And so there's several elements to that. One of the elements is bond proceeds. If we can't pay for it ourselves out of free cash, or we don't have money otherwise, we would have to bond for it. So page 29
Hmm,
shows you
7 million.
the bonds that need to occur that are indicated in the 5-year plan. The 7 million, that's FY 24, that's already baked in.
Mhm.
We haven't borrowed it yet. 25, we don't have any borrowing anticipated. That's this upcoming year. In 26, we have about 5.3 million for town landing and stormwater work that if we do those projects, we will need to bond for. And in
And
FY
then
27,
disaster strikes in 2027.
if we're moving forward with a wastewater project, we'd be on tap for the 130 million. And who knows what, that number will actually be by the time we get there, but
Yeah, that-
that's what I'm carrying at the moment.
Yeah,
So this tells you, and then the top of this sheet, it has the existing bonds.
mhm,
So if you had the existing bonds and you add the new bonds at the bottom, it shows you how much debt would be outstanding at the end of each fiscal year.
mhm. So in 2027, it's 352. That's the principal, then 220.
Right, 220 million.
Mm.
Page 30, which is the next page, translates that into how does that impact our budget? What's the debt service associated with that? So again, across the top, I've got the existing debt service on the existing bond issues. In the middle is kind of the anticipated debt service on the new bond issues.
Mhm.
And that gives you the grand total, old and new, what might our debt service look like in the future?
220.
And not to make you think too hard, but you might recall just a few months ago, we did a 5-year operating budget projection. This is the basis for the debt service of that projection. I'm going to, next year when I do that 5-year look ahead on the operating budget, I'm going to use this as the debt service piece. So that's how all these things do tie together over time. So to rein us back in, you got this great packet. I guess my advice to you would be, you have an opportunity to speak to each of the department heads about the things that are on the details that are in this packet. But for our purposes, what I would suggest that we focus on is the 5-year plan and where things fall and how we plan to pay for them. And if we can't, then, what decision do we make to either not do it or defer it? Now finally, Mary, you can go to this sheet that has the blue across the top.
Mhm.
This is what's on tap for the upcoming town meeting. So, I try not to sweat the small stuff into terms of a 5-year plan. I want to make sure as much as possible is on there and that we have, an order of magnitude, of the amounts. But, 5-year plans are going to change. So I try not to worry too much. But what we do need to lock down is this sheet of what's on tap for FY 25 and should we do these things or not? And so I guess I'll stop there, Mary, and suggest to you that, anybody can ask any question. And like I said, you'll have opportunities for the departments when they come in to talk to them about it. But this is the upcoming plan. And if we want to talk about those, we can do that too.
Karen, can I ask a question?
You sure?
Rich, how did you come up with the priorities on these? The 2s, the 4s, the 3s, the 1s?
So they're historical, some of them. And in here somewhere, and off the top of my head, I don't want to quote what it says because I probably will misquote it. But that's why in the budget instructions, it says what these priorities mean or refer to. I need to work with our department heads. I'd like them to take a little bit more ownership of prioritizing their stuff. But anything that's a recurring program essentially is a 2, meaning that it's important or essential to maintain the level of service and the level of equipment that we've had to deliver operating results. So at this point, I think the short answer to this is it's a bit subjective. But there is some criteria that one could apply, which is in the, that's why I provide those instructions on how to derive a priority.
Does this mean though that, these projects, all these projects will get done theoretically? Or funded theoretically?
Right. Anything on this list is what we're trying to put at town meeting
This
to
year.
approve funding.
Even if it's a low priority number, it's on the list to be done.
Right. Well, you know, if we can. So this is where the rubber meets the road and the discussion we got to have here, right? So it's on here because I think we can fund them. It doesn't mean we have to. Or maybe we'll want to save that money for something that's a higher priority in the subsequent year, right? Because we know we got some big ticket, which is why you have a 5-year plan. We've got these other things coming up. So even though it's on the list and it's a, you know, a 4 or a low priority, we might make that decision of, you know what, we really shouldn't do that because next year we're going to have these other things hitting and we'd rather save the money, put it aside in a stabilization fund perhaps, and use it for that.
Thank you.
But that's why I go through all of this. You're hitting right on the nail on the head and why I'm focusing your attention right to this list is, and regardless of whether I've gotten great participation in people prioritizing it or not, that's why I put down my own subjective prioritization. Because I do want to have that discussion and I think it's appropriate for you guys to have that discussion is, do we need these things? At the moment, I think we can, at the end of this, you see that there's a funding sources associated with all this. So I think we can accomplish all this. Or fund all this, I should say.
Mhm.
But do we need to or want to?
So I have a couple questions. And unfortunately, I wrote this down a while ago, probably a year or so ago, and I couldn't find my answer. At the top, when you, along the blue line, where you have on the third item, NRAM, I can't remember what those stand for.
Yeah, me neither. New
Something-
replacement.
Something replacement,
So if it's a new thing, you know, we want to indicate
And-
this is a new asset that we're adding.
new.
M is maintaining what something we
maintain-
got.
Yeah, yeah,
R would be replacing something we have,
replace.
and A is a acquisition, I believe. I'm not sure why that's different
What's the
than new.
difference between acquisition and new?
I don't know.
Well, if it's a new piece of equipment versus an acquisition of a property or I don't know.
Okay.
You just notice I put a,
We
I'm
don't
sorry?
have any A's.
I was looking to see if there are any
No
A.
raise anyway.
We don't
Yeah.
have any A's.
Not using
Worry
the
about
A.
that this year.
so I probably had the same question.
I'll wait till next year.
Exactly.
Okay, I have a couple of other questions. I know there's a facility study that's being requested. And I don't believe we have the information or the results of that facility study. Obviously, we're having that done because we're expecting to get some information as to what the results of that would be, which would mean certain things perhaps should be done that we're maybe not aware of or that are worse than we thought they were, or however you want to phrase it. How is that being, when should that study be completed and would those results be apropos to this fiscal year 25 plan,
I don't think it's going to change FY 25,
or 26?
but
Will be
it
done this
literally
year.
just started.
The
Just got-
study,
Yeah, just got the first invoice. And it's progressing, but I think that we're a few months out on that being wrapped up. And then I'm gonna have to spend some time analyzing that. But
Yeah.
you bring up a great point. But the reason I really wanted that, and I gotta just take it an aside here and congratulate Mira. Mira helped us get a $10,000 grant
Mm.
through our insurance company, Maya. To help fund it, funds a little bit more than half of that. And what we'll get is an engineering study of almost like a condo association, right? Where they say, you're gonna go look at this condo and you have got a roof and that roof's gonna need to be replaced in 25 years. And here's the anticipated cost of that roof. And you got sidewalks and you got a septic system, you got a fire alarm system, you got an elevator. You're gonna have to replace windows and siding. And they put all this together in a capital plan for the condo association. And the condo association turns around and says, well, because of that, not only do you have to pay an operating assessment of $200 a month for the insurance and taxes, but we also want to charge you $500 a month for a capital assessment that goes into a capital fund.
For maintenance type
For
of thing?
maintenance funds, right? So what I'm contemplating is that we would do something similar. And it will justify all of our recurring maintenance plans, which right now are just based on things that our own DPW staff can identify to me and put in a 5-year plan, and I'm kind of annualizing it to try to smooth this out. But I'm hoping that this assessment will really smooth out and that, hey, we ought to be putting in $20,000 a year for a library or, whatever the number is. And
And for me, the secondary value is that it does help us prioritize what's coming up immediately versus what we can let wait. So if we have things that we need to
Do right away.
do right away, we know that, or we know that in 3 years, we're going to need a major replacement that, Rich needs to
Yeah,
add
oh,
money to
yeah.
the annual
Mhm.
maintenance budget for. So,
Yeah.
so
I would think that information, the results of that study. would
Very
be ver-
useful.
Very, very helpful.
but it'll be helpful no matter when we get it. So,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
it's not in time for this year and it's for
Mhm.
next year, it'll be useful then too.
Mhm.
I don't know. I wouldn't say this is necessarily in a perfect world. I mean, people have different philosophies on it, but in my perfect world, it just makes it easier. If I knew a study told us you should, have X amount of dollars for a police station and X amount of dollars for a fire station and for a library, then we would fund that amount of money so that when we got to do these replacements, we have the money. The thing that follows, which is a great discussion with the finance committee, is okay, what money do we want to use to rely on that? Right now, everything on this facilities capital plan, whether it's this year or the next 5 years, is funded through free cash.
Mm.
So we got to make sure that we are generating $1.2 million, I think is what it indicates here,
Mhm.
over each of the years of
Yeah.
free cash to fund this capital plan. Because if we're not going to do that, then we cannot then also say that we're going to fund a
Mhm.
facility maintenance plan. So maybe that comes to a point of, just like we did on the equipment and the fleet, and we had a $400,000 capital override for those items, maybe we override tax levy money to fund that's one approach is to increase your tax levy to fund the replacement on the buildings. Or,
There
can-
are other options.
or you can do what a lot of towns do. The other strategy is to consolidate significant improvements, like you got to replace an elevator or a whole wholesale roof or something like that. That's big money. You put a bunch of those things together in 1 year, and every few years you do a facilities bond.
Mm.
You get money to upgrade your facilities, and then you're paying debt service. So lots of strategies, right?
So, Rich, just to pick an item, random. On town landings, Hemingway Landing, there's a town and a grant component.
Mhm.
Does the town have to pay that $100,000 to get the $460,000 grant?
Yes.
It's a required match.
Right.
Yep.
But
Could you tell me, sort of going back to what Paul just said, I've never heard of Abilina's Creek.
So down here at Fort Hill, when you
Governor
dip in the
Prentz
road,
Road.
Governor Prince and Fort Hill, the marsh on
Mhm.
it's at the west side of the highway. On the right, if you're heading towards the lanes, that whole marsh is
Oh,
Abilene.
I've never,
Leading into that is Abilina's Creek.
I've never heard of it before.
And it's very similar to the Rotary, where we've interrupted bodies of water to place a road
Road.
or a rotary. Same thing happened there.
Mm, mm.
But that project, and honestly, I'm actually pretty excited about that one, because we don't know what might be there for us as far as, to me, it's part of our wastewater planning.
Exactly.
So the project here is to improve the flushing. And the only thing I have is just prior experience in another town, and in this case, it was Yarmouth. Parker's, everybody's probably familiar with Route 28 and where Captain Parker's restaurant is. Captain Parker's restaurant is on the Parker's River, which had a very, very narrow bridge. Well, not a narrow bridge, it had a long bridge, but a narrow opening under the bridge. So Parker's River flushing and flow up and down that river, because it's a tidal river, comes in through a marsh, was restricted. We had a 99% TMDL requirement, a total maximum daily load, removal requirement, meaning we had to remove 99% of the nitrogen in the Parkers River because it was so restricted and so overloaded with nitrogen.
Mm.
However, so to address that, you could do a couple of things. You could build the wastewater and sewer infrastructure and connect enough homes in that watershed to stop them from putting it into the
Is
Parkers
that
River.
being caused by septic systems
Yeah.
here on the water?
So you could build a huge collection system to collect the 99% of nitrogen that you needed to remove to collect it all, and you would meet your requirement. But that's expensive. What was better was, why don't we just let the Parkers River, run free and improve the restriction at the bridge and widen that opening. Improving the flushing, because you got tidal flow coming up, and that removed, and that would be interesting to see, because I just wrapped that project up. But the estimate was that we would go from a 99% nitrogen removal requirement to like a 75%. So what's that mean in real terms? What it means is you don't need to build as big of a collection system
Mhm.
for your wastewater.
Mhm.
And it was much cheaper to do that bridge
Yeah.
in Flushing than to do
The
that.
other.
And the state paid it because it was a state road.
However, Rich is not promising that that will happen in Avelinos Creek because we really don't know what the situation there is.
I've just never heard the name before.
Well, I mean, but think about it,
Yeah.
but it's the same concept.
Yes. the
And
same
it's also the same
concept.
concept that's in Wellfleet with the Herring River project, right? Improve
Yeah,
tidal
yeah.
flushing into a tidal river.
And that's
Water
what
flow.
basically that all of the landings, the town landings are based on two plans, our wastewater plan and our town landing improvement plan.
Mm.
What we've been able to do is leverage USDA funds for flushing and shellfishing, cleaning up shellfish areas to get both the design and the construction funds for all of those landings.
And this is all largely with the exception of some stormwater, which is funded 100% by the USDA. They'll handle the stormwater piece. If we want to do something above and beyond that, that's on us. And that's why you'll see in the plan, it's not in this year's budget, but in the 5-year plan, it's in the next year, is some big amounts, some borrowing to actually do that work, and right now I think we're just estimating $1.5 million for each landing. We don't know that it's going to cost $1.5 million. Hopefully it comes in lower. And even then, we're pretty optimistic that we can get a Seaport Council grant that might fund about half of it. So again, it's in the plan to put it on your radar so that you know what we're, the context of what we're talking about these things. I'm also a big believer in making sure we get as much of our projects that we're doing here, whether the grant or not. But just because it's on the plan doesn't mean that it's all on the tax levy either.
No, and the USDA is committed to giving us 75% of the construction funds as well, so.
So I have another question, and it's more on the 5-year plan versus just the fiscal year 25. And it's back to the wastewater where you've got for fiscal year 26, you've got you mentioned earlier, the 130 figure. And that is really based on what I've seen on all the wastewater documents. That's really on 2023 value or price. So shouldn't that, are we being realistic to put in 130 when?
It's not on 20,
No, they forwarded it.
they had
They
a
forwarded
30% escalation in that price, 30%.
Oh, I thought I read where it was, it was a $2023.
They had a 30%, but that got it to
160.
160.
Yeah.
But he's only carrying 130 as well.
Right.
No, they tend to inflate these for the future anticipated mid-year of the construction start date. And I think they did here.
We'll
too.
know more.
But the bottom line is,
Mm.
this is the $6 million we just borrowed to do design and engineering. So again, I don't get too worked up about something that's, maybe it's the second year. I'm a little bit more concerned than something that's 5 years out or 4 years out. But that's going to inform our decision and what this costs and what we might actually do. So I'm not, it should be 130, should be 160, should be 127 and
Plus-
200,000. I don't, no idea.
With wastewater, we have other funding sources to apply to it. So even if it's 160, the amount that the town may pay will be far less than that.
This is still a bit to be determined on that. So you're
Okay.
right. It could be something different. targeted watershed management plan, I think indicates something a little bit different, but it also carries a big contingency. Why I was comfortable with that, you know, we're pretty sure it's gonna be around the 130 for sure. You know, it'll be different than that, but
Does that include, what did they say, 11 million to undo or demolish the DPW building and replace it? There was some monies in there for that too.
yeah, that's all decision points to come. That's why, again, I'm not sweating the small stuff too much. We know we got a big hit coming and I want to reflect that. But there's a lot of decision, once we get through the design phase, there'll be a lot of decision points that'll have to be made. What are we gonna do with DPW facility? You know, what type of
Yeah.
pump stations do we want? Where do we want to locate this thing? How do we want to size the collection system? Those will all be choices that the town will need to make.
Mhm. So essentially for fiscal year 25, I'm looking at the final numbers on the the end of the second page where you have the funding and you've got the capital levy of 427.5.
Hmm.
So that is going to, is that something that we're going to have an override on, or is that something that,
No. So we already had an override for
Oh, I know.
400,000.
Yeah.
And so holding to that commitment of using that $400,000 override for capital, we continue to use.
oh, that was a couple years ago.
Yeah, so still
okay.
using it for capital.
We used it for police and fire and,
Yeah, that's what funds
yeah,
the
yeah, police and
equipment
fire.
and fleet replacement programs.
Okay,
As a matter of fact, we're committing to using more than what we said we'd use because, you know, we only override 400. I'm hoping to carve out some bucks
Yeah,
to get up to
yeah,
this 427.
yeah, that was approved for an annual levy.
Mary,
Yes, Roy.
may I raise a question on a couple items in that little box that
Mhm.
you just referred to? In terms of lease insurance, or excuse me,
Lease
lease
issuance.
issuance.
Mhm,
What
yeah.
is the source of that?
So that's different than bonding, but it's still debt, so it's akin to it. But the only place that we're doing that is with the fire department, and they're doing it on their ambulance replacement plan. So that 505,000, pretty sure that's all just one ambulance. And it's going to be, and it's funded out of and that lease payment is funded out of our ambulance fund, which is why again, going back to that quick walkthrough I gave you, there's a projection of our ambulance fund in the packet.
Mhm.
And so I want to do that projection to make sure that anytime we issue a lease, that that ambulance fund's actually going to be able to support that payment.
Okay, thank
And
you.
it does.
And what about chapter 90? That's state money, I know that. But
Yeah.
how is that determined?
It's a, what do you call it? Almost like an entitlement. So we get about $250,000 a year. And right now we're sitting on over $1 million that haven't been allocated
Okay,
over future years. So in order to access that money, we get an award, but we don't get the cash. But actually, I just was looking at that earlier this week. We're going to set up some accounting mechanisms in our, we have a chapter 90 fund that accounts for all this stuff. So I'm going to set up some accounting mechanisms so that when the money's awarded to us, even though we don't have it, it's added to our unallocated budget. And then whenever we want to spend it, we got to send a request to the state who has to approve it. And when we get an approved project, then I'll take it unallocated and add the budget to the project. So these represent that 450 is, I think, a loader and a 6-wheel dump truck. Both of which qualify they are used on highways, so the state approves them. Chapter 90 is the chapter of the state budget that provides for highway funding.
and if we get any funding on an annual basis, if we don't use it, it can roll into the next few fiscal.
Does.
next
We
fiscal
don't get
year.
the money, we just got the award. But the award will continue, they don't take it away from us.
Okay, thank you.
And then when we have to front the money first, and then we submit a reimbursement to the state and they'll pay us.
Mhm.
I have one other comment to make, and it has to do with the 5-year plan. And it's regarding let me see, where was it? Regarding. Oh, here it is. The playground, repair. You've got 50,000 for the fiscal year 25. Which makes a lot of sense. You've got it on the fiscal year 25 and you've got it on the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
And they did come in, to the community preservation folk for 50,000 for the playground at the elementary school. But that's just a phase, that's really a feasibility study. So I'm just going to say, I would recommend that you've got 400,000 much further along in 29. And I'm going to say that that's going to be spent earlier than 29, because they're in the process of, we're paying for the feasibility study so that then the work would be done. So I'm hoping that the work that would be done at the playground would be before fiscal year 29.
Well, I talked to Bill, the principal over there, and
Yeah.
that's the information he gave me. No, so
Yeah,
that's why we get pass these out. This is the first draft.
Mhm.
If, I don't know how significant.
It's
some stuff
CPA
change-
money, so it's
but-
not,
But yeah, to your point, if we know that information and it's what we expect, we should, try to put our best information forward in this, right?
yeah.
So-
yeah.
Got a question on the stormwater system maintenance program, which is like $50,000 occasionally.
Mhm.
I sense that that's a much larger dollar amount that is needed to really take care of the stormwater issue in this town.
Well,
Am I
this
correct?
isn't taking care of the stormwater issue. It's just sucking out the culvert, the
The
catchment, the
Okay.
catch basins that we
Yeah,
have.
there's a thing from I think it's the DEP.
Yeah.
The MS was called MS4
Yeah.
stormwater regulations. So that's really just the capital items maintenance items needed to accommodate that permit.
There is another place on the plan where it's stormwater infrastructure.
Yeah.
Maintenance. I want to say it's like $140,000 or something, but that's different. I would assume that's what John would use to design and put in new stormwater systems.
Because, I just on the road that I live on, there's just a problem every time it rains.
Yeah, because we're sinking and the sea is rising. It's just hard. To try and do drainage when you're at sea level and, there's no place for the water to drain.
No.
It's really difficult. We've had to, Shayna's grant a couple of years ago looked at what it would cost to raise roads, to actually lift the roads up. That's, engineering wise where we are. So it's going to be a big problem and it's going to
get worse.
get worse.
And Russ, you bring up a good point on a lot of this, and I've always had this concept. And when we get to this point, we'll talk about this, and select board will talk about it, I'm sure, but we're gonna be required, if we're gonna get SRF funding for our wastewater implementation, to have another enterprise fund. It's just a requirement of them, whether you like it or not, it's what they need you to do. But I'm more apt to ask people to, consider, and this again, a good discussion to have. Should we have a wastewater enterprise fund or should we have a water resources enterprise fund? Water resources
would be
kind of
larger-
encompasses,
larger.
a bigger thing. No, you can still set appropriate rates and fees for appropriate services. You could have a water rate, you could have a sewer rate. You could have a stormwater rate, which is I've helped other towns, bigger cities actually charge commercial entities stormwater fees because they got a lot of runoff because they got big parking lots, that type of stuff. So there's all kinds of things you can do. But I think it's a great philosophical discussion to have as we flesh out this wastewater plan. We know we're gonna have to adopt an enterprise fund. How do we want to structure that? How do we want to do it? And we probably ought to incorporate all this stormwater stuff into that at the same time.
I agree.
Any other questions?
I know you're just seeing it tonight for the first time, or not maybe seeing it, but talking about it. So to me, this is the first run through. You'll be getting a run through, obviously on the operating budget. So if you have any questions between now and then, obviously we can get together and talk about them. But you will have an opportunity with each department coming in to actually ask about each of these items as well, and the 5-year plan, so. Don't feel like you gotta know it all this month type of thing. It's a lot.
Okay. Put this together, put this together.
Mira, when do we think we're gonna have
Thank you, Rich.
We have,
for-
binders coming in this week,
for the
right?
review. Yeah,
Yeah,
So.
Mara said that she was ordering some binders for everybody, so.
And so you have the binder, and then hopefully also this will be start putting all the stuff on the website. It is easy to review it all on
Mhm.
the website, but
And I just want everybody to know that Mara has offered, as we've done in the past, to make copies of stuff and put it in the front lobby for people, so you don't have to be making 50 copies of, 50 pages of paper for your
Not making it 100 pages of copy.
all right. I'm going to go on to the agenda, and I'm going to go on to item number 6, old business. And the first item on number 6, old business, is the capital projects committee update. And I know Steve isn't here tonight, but Steve and Peter are on the committee. And I gather that you have there was an interview process, and two people associated with the select board have been named. No?
Not me.
No, it's not you. No,
Yeah, I think
no,
so.
I mean, there are two people
I
that,
think so. They've asked 2 people.
that two people have been appointed by the select board one way or another.
Mhm.
And then you had your first meeting,
And the next meeting is December 12th.
December 12th, and your meeting on Mondays,
I think it's Tuesdays.
no, Tuesdays.
3 to 5.
Second Tuesday of the month is what we're trying to do.
Second Tuesday. Okay, second Tuesday,
I think the
December-
select board has appointed one, Fred Guidi.
Right.
But now we have 2 applicants for the other.
the fifth
That's-
person hasn't been appointed?
I thought it was, but I just got a
Oh, that,
communication from the search committee yesterday. and
he
it said
went
he's
to
got
our-
2 people.
Yeah, he went to our first meeting because I invited him because he's had his application in the longest, right? And so we were just waiting for the search committee to do an interview for him before it goes to the board.
But now there's another candidate,
I know,
second.
but they're both part-time resident taxpayers.
Right.
So,
because I was contacted a while back by the search committee to be involved with an interview for somebody that would have been appointed by the select board. And I don't know, something got screwed up with timing and what have you, I don't know, and it never happened, and you were also
Yeah.
contacted.
And I was in touch with them yesterday, so I think by our next meeting, we'll have that all squared away.
Okay. So we still don't know the name of the fifth member.
Officially.
Okay, and as discussed in the past, that is, you plan on also reviewing the town hall renovation, even though it's not a bonding issue,
Yes,
but it's over $1 million. Okay. The next item under number 6 is B, Nauset Regional High School construction update. And I know a number of people received stuff that Peter passed out. I have been attending, I'll wait till that's another thing, but I did attend a meeting the other day, and you may have zoomed in, I'm not sure, regarding the 7.2 million that has been discussed, and that isn't exactly decided now. It's still up in the air, and the school, I think it's the school folks are going to have to respond with providing financial information before any of that 100 million is allocated out to the 16 schools that are in the process of being built. I have a letter that was sent to the school committee on that 100 million, but it doesn't tell you that you're getting 7.2 or
No, they
when you
won't.
might get it or anything else.
You haven't
so-
heard any more about that, have you?
I haven't.
Yeah,
Supposedly our owner's project manager has to
Cha.
submit some more paperwork
mhm.
to the MSBA. And I can't tell you what the status of that is, but I'm sure they're working on it and we'll be hearing the answer.
So, and a couple people had some questions on the contingency question. And we've talked in the past about perhaps having some folks, Greg, perhaps, come
Yeah.
to a meeting. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, we talked about maybe having Greg come to this meeting, but today, but I think I can answer most of the questions that people have, and Greg's a busy man. He spends an awful lot of time on this project, so didn't want to drag him up here, especially where we're missing a couple of members. So I thought maybe, I don't know what the agenda is going to look like on January 8th for the joint meeting of the select board. Because I'm sure the couple members of the select board may have some questions too. Would that be too
Too much?
much?
We could, I mean,
Okay,
I don't know that meeting, what that meeting has other than the budget presentation, which usually
This is quite
is quite
lengthy.
when Rich does it. When I did it was like 15 minutes.
so maybe we could put him up first and get, so he could.
Yeah, you
his
could
family.
put Greg up first and then,
Yeah,
As long as it's good news. I don't want
They
to
would
follow bad
agree.
news.
Yeah, we don't want to follow any bad news.
that's pretty good news. I mean, basically, I sent you the monthly report from November 8th. And the, all systems are go. We got about between 120 and 140 people working there every day, workers. So it's really progressing. It's on schedule. It's on budget. The contingency, we took a big hit in the contingency with the surprises from N building, but those are behind us now. So we're feeling pretty comfortable about the contingency, but the second half of the project is all remodeling, so I'm sure we'll also have some surprises, but the architect and the OPM are doing a study to try to look forward and make of possible items that might be coming up on the second phase. So and they've started that process, and to this point, they're still comfortable that we're going to be able to make it with the contingency budget that we have. Yeah, any specific questions?
the main issues on the contingency recently seem to be the asbestos was an issue.
That was a fairly big one, although we
Yeah.
had a pretty good budget for that to begin with. So the big contingency was the condition of N building.
Mm.
Originally the intention was to save all the windows.
windows, yeah.
The structure around the exterior, and all that had to be redone. And then we had a issue with one of the subcontractors where there was a discrepancy in the specifications and the plans, and they said they thought they were bidding on one thing, and the architect said it was clear that anyway, we had to resolve that, and that was a fairly big number,
Mm.
but that's over with. And that's the same contractor that's gonna do phase 2, so that's behind us. But other than that, no, it's just things like they're actually, I was at a meeting this morning. It's call it a coordination meeting between all the trades, and they have these incredible 3D computerized version of the plans where they show the heating ducts coming through the wall and the cooling pipes in the fire sprinkler system pipes, and they're still resolving conflicts.
Mm.
on phase one, but they're also looking at phase two. So, you know, there's stuff and I did, that's what I was, I'm so glad Steve Konachik's on this committee because he has experience in this, but I did ask him. I took him up there for a tour actually, last week before, and we, you know, and I also asked him what his feeling was on the level of change orders that we're seeing. Is it,
That was another issue
was it,
for some people.
you know, typical or not, or high? And he said he thought it was, you know, within the order of what his experience had been. So that was encouraging.
So I guess I'd like to end that conversation with, perhaps you could get, you want to work with Jackie as far as making that Greg come for a short period of time before the budget hearing on 12/8 or not? What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, if we try and put it on the agenda, Kayla will call.
Mhm.
Do you think it should be Greg and who else? Just Greg?
I think so. I mean, and you know, he doesn't have a whole lot more knowledge than you and I have about it, but he does have a little more.
Mhm.
And so I think that'd be good. I mean, I don't think it would make any sense to have the OPM or
No, I
any of
wasn't.
those people come.
Okay, so we'll work on having Greg come for the 12/8 meeting.
Yep.
And speak before.
No,
1/8.
No.
1/8.
1/8 meeting.
I'm sorry, what did I say? 12/8,
Yeah.
1/8, yeah. Yeah, I had, for some reason I put down 12/8, 1/8. Yeah, we're not meeting on 12/8. Okay. And still on item number 6, number C, the Nauset Regional School Committee Budget and Finance Subcommittee. I've been attending a large number of their meetings. Peter has attended some. Tom has attended some, Steve has attended some. And we had one very interesting, they have hired an outside legal counsel to review the agreement within the 4 towns. The last time it was reviewed or looked at, or I should say done, was back in 2002. So there have been a large number of issues that are being discussed. No decisions have been made. Some of them has to do with enrollment, and I actually have asked them for some of the documents that they've been discussing, and I have the enrollment for the schools for October 1st of this year, which is what in the past has been used. But they are talking about a 3-year average, rolling average. That's up for discussion. Another issue is transportation. They're having quite a few issues with transportation. They can't find bus drivers. They went to smaller buses when the schools were getting smaller, the number of students were getting smaller, and now they can't find bus drivers, so they're doubling up on some of the routes, and the buses aren't big enough to hold the doubling routes. So it's really an issue. The voting strength by town is being discussed. The new members, how to share in the capital costs with additional members. And that would be in particular, Provincetown and Truro. That's another issue. So there was a big discussion on the comments that their outside counsel had made on the agreement that was in place back to 2002. And the discussions are continuing. So I don't know if were you on that, in on that Zoom discussion?
Yeah, I was on a few of them.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the most
There was one
recent one,
yesterday
the one,
about
yeah,
there's a subcommittee that's looking at
yeah.
the new agreement.
right.
Were you
That's,
there?
yeah, yes. Yeah.
You couldn't see who was.
No, you
was
couldn't
there.
see who was
Yeah.
there. So I didn't know whether you were there or not.
Yeah. But they're gonna be public meetings on this. And then the Brewster Finance Committee
Mhm.
Chairman has
Pete,
reached out to
the
try to have a-
finance committees in the 4 regional towns, and we're planning on meeting on December 11th. at the Eastham Elementary, at the Eastham Public Library.
And they have the council, they've hired a council I think,
Right,
to
right.
rewrite the agreement or to
Nancy Campany,
update it, and there's a draft.
right,
So
right,
at least
right. I have it
We
here.
know where we're headed.
Yeah,
And no one needs to panic about that. That has to go to all 4 town.
I know,
meetings.
I know.
Yeah,
And I think that if changes are being made, that I think that's something that we would look into for the May town meetings. We'll see, but that's where we are right now. I will say that based on this is the information I have right now for October 1st, and the number of students is declining, which doesn't surprise any of us, so. Yeah,
let's,
that's,
One thing we're gonna find is our participation though is.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, the overall decline in students, but I think Eastham's participation, Eastham's share of those students for both the tech and Nauset is going to increase, which is a budgetary impact to us. So we'll figure that out in the next month or so and get you, when we do the budget update, I would expect our assessment for the districts to go up because our participation is up.
I think that that's maybe one of the reasons why the rolling average is being discussed. So that it doesn't go up and down, quite as much. So that if it was on a rolling average, that it would be easier to figure out for budget reasons, budget purposes.
Yeah, it was a request of the town managers to to the school, regional school committee to look at that and to open up the agreement. So
Mhm.
that's how it came about.
Mhm.
that's what,
Mary, when are the 4th FinComs meeting?
I'm sorry?
When are the 4th FinComs meeting together?
Oh, December 11th. It's not the 4 FinCom meetings, 4 FinCom department, what's the word I want? Member,
It's not all
thank
committees.
you. It's not all of the FinCom meeting, members meeting.
Yeah.
It's only specific people from each
Oh,
each
okay.
one, so we don't have a quorum. People that have been involved one way or another from each town with on the school issues, yeah. You'd like to see, this is the enrollment.
I've seen.
what's
these
the
videos.
bottom line on the enrollment? How are we doing?
At the high school,
I'm concerned about the high school being,
905
yeah,
is 771.
they attend for October this
Yes,
year.
yes, yeah, 771.
771. So we lost a lot of students from school choice, I imagine,
right.
because of the construction.
And no international students
how-
of any kind.
How's the middle school compared to last year?
Which I don't have last
They don't
year's.
have
I don't
last.
have, this is just October 1st.
Everything is down, but not by much.
I attended a Eastham, Steve Kononchik and I went to the Eastham School Committee meeting. And I think their attendance is down 14 students from last year.
The current kindergarten
And
is
the kindergarten is
114 and the current pre-K is 49.
They also said the kindergarten.
That's all the elementary schools, but
Oh.
Eastham has a kindergarten class of 19 and 11 in pre-K. It's
And I think 19 was quite a bit. lower
in
than it was
19
last year.
and in first grade is 29.
Yeah.
So there's 10 student difference between first grade
Big
and
first grade
kindergarten.
class, though, that's good.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah,
We'll see.
Quite a few COVID babies.
I'm sorry? I
We had quite a
The
few
high school-
COVID babies.
I can't tell you, the high school was designed to be fully utilizable, or whatever the word is, it's population of 700 or 720, something like that. It's from between 700 and 905, maybe even up to 1,000. But below 7, they shut some classrooms down, I guess, or move the middle school up there.
So anyway, as I said, there are 4 of us frequently attending the various meetings, either in person or by Zoom. And so they know that we are interested in
Yeah.
paying attention. And I think in most cases, there's only been one other person from outside the committee, and that was one person from Brewster.
And we've been well received.
Yes, received.
They're happy
Yeah,
to.
yeah. Any questions on the school stuff? I'm on to number 7, the town manager's report and staff update, and I did send out I should say, I did, Mira included the town manager's report in the packet, and I asked Kayla to send it out at some point as well, so I'll let you chat. Jackie?
Okay, I'll go down the agenda. The town hall renovation status is that Builders System Inc. was here today, met with the building inspector and Keenan and Kenny, and they've chosen their mobilization site. So they're gonna start to mobilize Friday, put up fencing and stuff into the beginning of next week. So they're starting hopefully next week.
Have they given you a schedule of starting and this and that and finishing or anything like that?
No, loosely what he's told, we haven't had a meeting to do that, but loosely what he's told me is that he's going to start with all the concrete work, see how much he can get done before a deep freeze. We're not doing any of the brick repointing until spring, so a lot of the work will be postponed until spring.
Mhm,
So we have steady temperatures,
mhm,
so.
yeah.
B, the community fund, since the last time I checked, we have had no new news. But I'm trying to reach out to them every couple of weeks. Hopefully we can move that along. It needs to move from one
Mhm.
house to the other.
I just have a quick question. I was just wondering if we are able to get anything, do you think, by the time of the next tax bills, to put something into the tax bills about it? It like we've done in the past.
Possible. I mean,
Well, if we
It's
don't,
possible.
we'll keep pushing the taxpayer taxation aid.
Yeah, but I was just
Either way,
thinking
we'll
that
be
would be
asking.
nice to be able to say something in and put a little thing in the tax bill.
Wastewater presentation. I don't know what to say about that, other than we did file, the filing for DEP was this week, 11:30.
Oh, good.
It's gonna be advertised in the Independent, Provincetown Independent. Begins a public comment period.
Mhm.
So there'll be a public comment period. So basically, it has been filed with DEP. It will be sent to our neighboring towns. And then we have a period of time where people can comment on it before the review period starts in January. And Brovitz Tea Time Town Center Plaza status, we have, Paul has a charrette with the business owners in the business district this Saturday, December 2nd. It's an all-day thing. And we did have a meeting scheduled with Environmental Partners Group and the traffic engineers for this Monday, but several people were sick, so we did not do that. So Kayla's rescheduling that, but
Mhm.
they've laid out a subdivision for us. We're just taking a look at it to see, what we think of it. And the only thing I don't know if I mentioned to you that the school committees have all voted to support a feasibility study that the towns of Brewster, Eastham, and Orleans are applying for a state regionalization grant to look at the elementary schools in particular, but all the town elementary schools, their buildings and their programs and their attendance data so that we can take a look at what's feasible in terms of sharing amongst the elementary schools.
What might that consist of? The sharing, are you talking about teachers or programs?
We're keeping an open mind, Mary, and we're talking about everything from minor sharing of a building where kids might come from another town to our building or vice versa, to regionalizing the elementary schools.
is there still being discussion regarding in particular, the two schools in Brewster with Stony Brook and Eddie?
Yep, those are both, and there's also a huge discussion going on in Orleans because their elementary school is in need of
Work.
major repairs.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So who's doing the feasibility study on the elementary schools?
oh, I don't know. We haven't even gotten the
Oh,
grant yet.
oh,
We're
oh,
applying for
oh,
a grant
oh,
in
oh, okay.
January.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm assuming we'll get the grant and then usually, I don't know, the Collins Center or one of those places that studies things like that.
So it's just elementary schools you're talking about?
Yep.
Mhm. Interesting.
Well, we already share all our other schools, so
Yeah,
it's the only
right.
thing
Yeah,
that's left.
yeah, yeah. Any other comments or questions from anybody on the town manager report? I have one thing under new business. I think everybody received also the latest schedule in your packet. I believe you each got the schedule for the upcoming budget warrant and town meeting. And I just want to make sure that everybody has it, number one. And the next meeting is scheduled for as we mentioned a minute ago, January 8th. And it's going to be a joint meeting with the select board on budget stuff. And I just want, on the agenda, it says 5:50. I just want to make sure everybody knows it's 5:30. If you're looking at the agenda and putting it on your calendar, it's for 5:30. And under the open meeting law that I just attended, it is required that when you have a joint meeting, that each committee have minutes. Not because in the past, I think we've just done one set of minutes and they said that even though if it's a joint committee, each committee should have minutes associated with their committee. And I guess the only other thing I have is that at our last meeting, we talked about the schedule as we're coming up with the various departments and that we would be sort of using the questions that we had put together last year with updates as appropriate. So I'm just asking everybody to start thinking about particular questions that they might have regarding any of the particular departments that we'll be meeting with, so that we can put our questions together prior to meeting with them.
Do we have a list of the questions?
No,
Yes, last
oh, yes, I do. Yeah,
Could we
yeah, I can.
want to send those out? So
I'll give them to Rich and we can put them
Or
in our
reinvent the wheel.
in our next packet.